Okay.
Hello, everyone. A very good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to all of you from whichever part of the world you're joining us today. And we'll be beginning our session really soon. Just give us like another 5 to 7 minutes. I see the numbers going up. Meanwhile, maybe a few housekeeping rules. I would request you to kindly use the Q&A box to type in your questions, comments, suggestions that you have during the session. Are actually really excited to invite you for the second in a series of webinar that WRI India and the Ares Charitable Foundation is conducting. Our first webinar happened in December 2022, where we looked at gender and just transition in the MSMEs in India. And this is the second webinar where we are trying to engage with with building an ecosystem for gender responsive and climate resilient MSMEs in India. We'll just begin shortly in another minute or so. And there is a slight change in the agenda as well. Unfortunately, Ms. Uma Mahadevan Dasgupta is not feeling well. And so is another one of our panelists, Shikha Joshi. So both of them are not going to be joining us today. Nonetheless, we'll move ahead with the rest of the exciting speakers and the panelists. And I'm sure it's going to be like a wonderful experience because we have this very rich speakers who bring together collectively a very rich experience of engaging with women across different sectors, countries, and institutions and locations. So yeah, looking forward to this. I will now hand it over to Michelle Armstrong from the Ares Charitable Foundation. Michelle is, Michelle, I welcome you to, you know, I'll stop sharing my screen and I welcome you to your introductory comments.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to join today's webinar, and just wanted to say thank you, of course, to WRI India, as well as to our esteemed guests who are joining, and also welcome, of course, to those who are dialing in for the webinar today. As was mentioned, I am Michelle Armstrong. I am the head of philanthropy for Ares Management Corporation, which is a leading alternative investment management firm. And I'm also executive director of the Ares Charitable Foundation, which is the philanthropic grant-making arm of Ares Management Corporation. So at the firm and at the foundation, we have a strong commitment to our core values, which include collaboration, showing that we are responsible, that we are entrepreneurial, that we are self-aware, and also that we are highly trustworthy. As you might be able to tell, the first letter of each of our core values actually spell out the word CREST. And so in 2022, last year, in keeping with Earth Day, our foundation actually launched an initiative that we also call CREST, which serendipitously, it wasn't necessarily intentional or planned, but actually coordinates and aligns quite well with the word that is formed when you look at the first letter of each of our firm's core values. For the foundation, we have a mission to accelerate equality of economic opportunity globally. And we do that to ensure that as many people as possible are touched and have their life improved as a result of the grants that we award to high quality leading nonprofits around the world. We consider World Resources Institute to be one of those organizations. And so with CREST, from the foundation's perspective, it is a 5-year, $25 million initiative that is called Climate Resilient Employees for a Sustainable Tomorrow. And what that means is that we are looking at how do we ensure that the gap between the number of people ready to enter green jobs and the demand for people to enter green jobs is closed. We want to ensure that not only are people prepared to go into these jobs that are beginning to emerge more and more as we pay attention to strategies to counter climate change, but also we want to be sure that we pay attention to how do we successfully and smartly and strategically reskill individuals who are already on the job so that they can adopt, adapt, and apply best practices when it comes to sustainability. In our partnership with World Resources Institute, we are particularly focused on micro, small, and medium enterprises and how to help them to be able to better withstand the shocks of climate change by adopting, adapting, and applying those best practices. I'm going to pause here because I know that my colleagues at WRI are so gracious as to show a brief overview video that highlights how we are approaching CREST, and then I'll speak a little bit more in depth about the work. So I will turn it over now to WRI, if you would be so kind as to share your screen and to show the video, and thank you in advance.
Just give me a second, I'm doing that.
Okay.
Hmm?
Ananya, are you playing the video? Just checking in case
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
still
you're not
loading
able to hear it?
or see it.
Okay, just a minute. Just
Yeah,
a minute.
you might want to reload
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I'll do that. Can you hear it now?
No, perhaps Michelle, do you want to try it from your end?
Just give me 1 second. If you'll
Yeah.
stop sharing, then I will share. Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay. Are you able to see my screen all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I hope that you all were able to see and to learn a bit more about the background of CREST and what we intend to do. You saw in the video that in addition to World Resources Institute, we also have a nonprofit partner in the US called Jobs for the Future, which is really focused on ensuring that we prepare at least 25,000 people to enter green jobs over the next 5 years. Whereas Jobs for the Future in the US is focused on the preparation of individuals for these kinds of careers. With WRI India, we're looking at those who are already working at MSMEs and helping them, as I said earlier, to reskill so that they can adopt, adapt, and apply the skills necessary to stand up and to implement best practices and sustainability, again, with an eye toward being able to counter climate change. So when we look at the rationale as to why we actually launched CREST, we understand that so often when philanthropy is investing in climate change, the focus is really around, for example, decarbonization. We at the Ares Foundation have 3 key funding priorities: career preparation and reskilling, entrepreneurship, and personal finance. But we also wanted to do our part and to think strategically and to think innovatively about how can we look at some of the major challenges that society is facing and be able to address them through the funding priorities so that we are not only staying true to our mission and to our strategy, but nonetheless being able to help support the problem solving necessary for some of these toughest, most instant challenges that the world faces. So for CREST, for us, is an opportunity to address the issues around climate change, but to do so through this workforce readiness lens, which we have not seen many philanthropies doing thus far. As I said, we've seen most of the focus be around how do you support, for example, deforestation, decarbonization, net zero emissions, but we are looking at the people behind climate change and preparing those people by helping them to have the skills necessary to be successful on the job, to be able to institute and to implement those best practices and sustainability, and concurrently be able to help hopefully improve their own quality of life and that of their family, particularly through, we hope, high wage, good paying jobs. And we also are very much looking at how do we make certain that those populations that might traditionally or historically be excluded from the preparation and reskilling when it comes to green jobs, how do we make sure that they are part of what we're doing through CREST? And that's where WRI India plays such a critical role. We are very much interested in ensuring that people of color, people of low socioeconomic or SES status are able to be successfully part of our initiative so that we're able to help them ready and to reskill for these jobs. We're also very much focused on women and how do we ensure that women, including women who own MSMEs, are able to be part of and to benefit from the work that we're doing through CREST in collaboration with WRI India. So we are so excited that the research that the team at WRI India is leading is looking really at, for example, those MSMEs that are women-owned, those MSME associations that are women-focused, so that we can be certain that that population that might otherwise be overlooked is able to be addressed and able to be supported through the work that we're leading. I believe I had done some research, and I know my colleagues at WRI India have been fantastic in helping to bring me up to speed on some of the data and the research that are out there on MSMEs in India. And I think it's something like 15 million of the MSMEs are women-owned, with over 70% being those within manufacturing enterprises. So we know that this is a critical part of the MSE population and one that we certainly want to be careful and smart that we do not overlook when we are seeing how can we hopefully help to affect positive change through CREST. So with that, I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity not only to join today's session, but also to give you some opening comments, a little bit of background and context about who we are at the Ares Charitable Foundation and what CREST is and why we are actually supporting it. And again, to say thank you to WRI India and the team and all that you are doing to help us to be able to address this issue by very carefully undertaking the work that our support is helping to fund. So thank you again, and I will turn things over to WRI.
Thanks a lot, Michelle, for that broad overall introduction. That was Michelle, uh, the head of philanthropy at Ares Management Corporation and the executive director of the Ares Charitable Foundation. She's been there since 2021. And now I would like to invite my colleague, Ashwini Hingle, who is an associate program director with the climate program at the World Resources Institute. She's a climate policy researcher and an economist who has over a decade's experience in the field of climate change mitigation. Ashwini, over to you.
Thanks. Can you share your screen, Ananya? I'll just let you know.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Michelle, for laying out the objectives of CREST, something which is truly innovative and definitely something that is strategic when we think about a low carbon transition and jobs in the future. So I'll just begin by, Ananya, if you could move to the first slide, by giving a very quick snapshot of the MSME sector in India today and why this, how does the CREST initiative also relate to the work we are doing in India under the grant. So to begin with, MSMEs or micro, small and medium enterprises are at the core of India's economy. The 63 million units of MSMEs that make up this sector together constitute 45% of India's total industrial energy consumption and contribute 30% to the national GDP. Out of all of these units, 99.5% are micro and small enterprises. India's MSME sector employs 110 million Indians, and most of these are informal jobs with very little social security. It is also important to note that the MSME sector is the largest employer of women, and yet they account only for 24% of this total workforce. Additionally, women-led MSMEs make up only 2 to 5% of the total medium and small enterprises, and even as part of micro enterprises, they only constitute 20% of all the MSMEs that we see. So despite the immense socioeconomic contribution of MSMEs, 67% of them still get left out of the formal banking system because of their small or informal nature, which then denies them access to reliable sources of credit, which further exacerbate their financial vulnerability when it comes to external impacts. This vulnerability was also exposed during the COVID pandemic, and it's also increasingly evident as we now see the impacts of climate change occur in front of us. So from induced heat waves to frequent floods, as well as resource and economic shocks, which then threaten the workers, their physical infrastructure, as well as their ability to conduct business profitably. Hence, here once again, access to finance is definitely worse off for women-led MSMEs and therefore making them even more fragile. So on the one hand, we have MSMEs in India, which are extremely vulnerable to climate shocks. But on the other hand, they're also key to meeting India's decarbonization goals. Indian MSMEs also make up a significant part of global as well as domestic value chains, and meeting corporate emission goals on scope 3 or indirect emissions will essentially mean that the MSMEs within these supply chains will have to reduce emissions. Therefore, not only is it important for MSMEs to decarbonize to mitigate climate change, but it is also a business imperative if they have to stay competitive. And finally, as India transitions to a low carbon economy, sectoral shifts will have the potential to create new jobs, new business opportunities, and this will include for women and will also be a lucrative space for foreign and domestic investment. However, at the same time, there will also be sectors, especially those that are entrenched within the fossil fuel economy, such as mining or traditional vehicle manufacturers, who will be negatively impacted by such sectoral shifts. Therefore, this low carbon transition might mean loss of business and livelihoods for many. Therefore, it is also important to understand what could be the potential impacts for MSMEs and what are the ways to address them. So next slide, Ananya. So what we have arrived at is the fact that we need a holistic approach if we are to really build resilience for MSMEs and make them competitive in the future economy. And to do this, there are four pillars that will need to be worked upon. The first is to build their resilience and preparedness to respond to climate impacts. The second is to build their capacity to decarbonize. And the third is to support them to ensure a just and equitable transition. However, all of this will also need to happen at scale. It will have to have, therefore, we'll have to come up with solutions that are scalable. And at the same time, these are solutions that will have to be very local, because the MSME sector in India is extremely diverse and geographically spread across the country. So an important part of getting to this point is what we see at the bottom, which is building awareness and sensitization among MSMEs, their workers, as well as local governmental as well as non-governmental institutions. The key elements of change, which you see on the top, include the availability and access to technologies that will need to be brought in, and also the availability and ability to tap into the finance that will be needed for change. Along with this, we will need tailored skilling programs for business owners and existing and new workers, so that these workers are better integrated in the low carbon economy. And finally, we will need policy change that can then enable and sustain the impact across all the pillars. Next slide, please, Ananya. So, yeah, you can just stop there. Yeah. So recognizing these needs, we are very grateful to the Ares Charitable Foundation for really putting together the CREST initiative, and we are very grateful to be part of this initiative, under which in India, our primary objective is to firstly build capacities of MSMEs and their workers to respond to the threats posed by climate change. The second is to build the skills and capacities that are needed to ensure resilient jobs, livelihoods for the future low carbon economy, and especially focusing on the needs of women and other vulnerable groups. And finally, to increase the awareness and understanding about the issues relating to climate change for MSMEs in India, which is really a sort of stakeholder that gets left behind when we talk about these large technological shifts that are happening. And the key levers that we plan to use in order to affect this change is through our core strength, which is research and engagement with local communities. And here our intention would be to assess the specific vulnerabilities across the sector and geography to understand the existing and potential challenges, mapping these risks and the potential climate response options that are available, the technology and finance options that are available, and the future skill requirements and where the gaps lie today. Secondly, informed through our research and engagement, we will develop tailored and scalable skilling and capacity building interventions that will be aimed at improving the capacity of MSMEs to undertake the necessary actions and become resilient in the face of climate change, as well as the low carbon shifts. And finally, all of these research and interventions will also create a space for us to engage more deeply with the MSMEs that we'll be working with, and therefore provide us with an opportunity to document and showcase the experiences of MSMEs, to highlight the issues on the ground, as well as to bring to light the kind of innovative interventions that might already be taking place, or the kind of impact a skilling program can create at a micro level, and then to be able to inspire and enable change at scale across sectors and geographies, and to also create insights for policymakers to do this through wider range of policies. So next slide, please. Oh, and one important piece of all of this, and which is at the core of it, is the people that we will engage with. So when we talk about our research or our objectives, at the core of it is who are the people who are most vulnerable, who will require the kind of interventions we are designing, and who will benefit the most from it. And one of the core things here, and as I mentioned earlier, is that there are groups within our ecosystem, be it women or other vulnerable groups, who are already vulnerable because of the social as well as economic realities of the world we are in today. But how can we, through this program, also make it an inclusive program and create the change and jobs that are more inclusive of all kinds of key stakeholder groups? So that is something at the core of it. And then I'll just move on to my last slide, Ananya. Yeah, so this is what the next 4 years will look like for us. So here, over the past few months, we have been working on selecting 2 MSME clusters where we will be working. This has been through a lot of understanding of the social, economic, as well as climate-related realities in the different sectors, geographies, and to identify the 2 clusters which will benefit the most from such a program like this. Over the next year, we will be assessing the climate vulnerability of these clusters for the businesses and the workers. And we will also be undertaking a skill and capacity gap assessment and developing the skilling program, which we will then roll out over the next 2 years, while also creating a platform for hosting MSME voices and also creating and disseminating different forms of communication through to a wider audience. Just if you can click once more. At the end of this project, what we hope to achieve and what we aim to achieve is to at least engage with 100 MSMEs and 1,000 workers to be able to elevate the voices of the people from the field, which includes the small and micro enterprises, the workers in these MSMEs, and especially women-led MSMEs and women workers. As we look at this happening across 2 sectors over a period of time, what we hope to build is to enhance the dialogue on the needs and the requirements of the MSME workers and MSMEs and their workers within not just the industry, but also with the local, state, as well as national governments. Very soon, in the month of June, we will be launching this program in the respective clusters, and we'll be very happy to look out for and engage with various partners, a lot of whom might be on the call today, to really work collaboratively on the field on this initiative. And once again, very thankful for CREST for really putting all of this together, and very happy to be part of this initiative. Thank you so much, Ananya.
Thank you so much, Ashwini. Thanks for that broad overview of what the CREST project is. According to our initial agenda, we had Ms. Uma Mahadevan Dasgupta, who's the Additional Chief Secretary, Department of Rural Development and Panchayat Raj with the Government of Karnataka, who was scheduled to give the keynote address. However, she has been feeling unwell today and has sent in her apologies. We will directly move on to the panel discussion in that case. One of our panelists, Shikha Joshi, who's the General Secretary of Seva Madhya Pradesh, also is not well today, and she also has sent in her apologies. With that, I would now like to invite the panelists. I first of all invite Sunaina Kumar, who is a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation and an executive director at the think tank India Secretariat. Sunaina, at ORF, Sunaina works with the Center for New Economic Diplomacy and focuses on gender. She has been a journalist for over 15 years and has worked with various national and international newspapers and news agencies. Joining her in the session moderated by her is Anubha Prasad. Anubha is the general manager with the Small Industries Development Bank of India, SIDBI, and presently heading its Patna region, comprising the twin states of Bihar and Jharkhand. Anubha is also passionate about encouraging women entrepreneurship, and she co-founded the Kare Keba Ventures, which translates to We Must Do It in Bhojpuri in 2021, which is Bihar's pioneering platform for curating, mentoring, handholding, and financing promising startups. With 14 deals so far, Kare Keba has a network of over 350 angel investors, and its success story has been captured by several media platforms. We also have Sharmila Bharatan from General Electric joining us today, who leads the policy and government affairs for GE in the South Asian region. She also serves on the board of GE India Industrial Private Limited and has over 32 years of international experience in policy regulation, climate change, for business portfolio, including in aerospace and defense, power sector, renewables, healthcare, oil and gas, rail transportation. So actually a wide variety of sectors that Sharmila has been working on. We also have Ankita Saxena, who's a manager, communications and business initiatives from Pratibha Syntex, which is based out of Madhya Pradesh. Ankita is an experienced professional with over 14 years of experience in providing products and services across the value chain. She believes in empowering C-level executives to make informed decisions regarding people, product, and the planet. Before joining Pratibha Syntex, Ankita was working in different positions with Interluxury Group in the UAE, Walmart India, and RPG Spencer's. I welcome, we also have Sijo John. Last but not the least, we also have Sijo John, who is with lead at CREA University, which was formerly called as IFMR lead. She's a senior program manager for enterprise development. She leads the Solutions for Transformative Rural Enterprises and Empowerment, abbreviated as 3 program, which provides technical assistance to the National Rural Livelihoods Mission in nurturing scalable enterprises. Before joining Lead CREA, Sijo worked on the themes of livelihood, skill development, nutrition and governance with Kudumbashri, NRO, National Skill Development Corporation, and IB Global Private Limited. I welcome all of you today to take over. We have about close to an hour. We could go through the panel, and then we could have a round of Q&A towards the end of it. Over to you, Sunaina.
Thank you, Ananya. And of course, Ananya has reminded me that I have to be very careful with the timekeeping. So I'm going to try and do 2 rounds of questions, if that works, and then open it up to the audience. But I just have to say that it is an absolute honor for me to be here with these wonderful panelists and to be discussing something that I think we all feel very passionately and very strongly about, which is women in the MSME sector in the context of employment. The MSME sector is a principal sector for female employment in India, and women make up about 24% of the total MSME workforce, a figure which is much lower compared to other developing countries. Women-owned MSMEs in India face a huge financing gap, and more than 3,000 women-owned MSMEs have shut down since the start of the pandemic in 2020, government data shows. On top of that, there is a need for them to adapt to energy transitions, to digitalization, and to changes in value chains. What support do women entrepreneurs and workers need to strengthen their resilience to climate change? That is the big question. And to discuss it, we have our speakers. They have already been introduced. So I'm going to just jump right in. And I'd like to begin with you, Anubha. Given your experience at SIDBI and with Karekeba Ventures, can you tell us a bit about your experiences of engaging with women entrepreneurs in rural India, the barriers that they face, and how can we increase the participation of women in MSMEs?
Thanks, Sunaina. And I'll just add to my introduction. It was a great introduction that you gave. However, I've worked for a couple of years at UN Environment as well, leading their piece of work on green economic policy, innovation finance, and inclusive economy. So that was also a great, exposure for me as well. So to speak from that perspective. Um, Today there's a festival actually, and the area around my office is, it's buzzing with a lot of sounds and sights. So I'm not sure whether that loudspeaker is interrupting this discussion. Not sure, but
It's
it's
perfectly fine, and it will add to all of it. So go ahead.
See, I've done about 26 years in SIDBI and 2 years in UN environment. And I floated Karekeba Ventures when I was on a sabbatical from SIDBI, a 3-year sabbatical. And then Karekeba, I started in the thick of pandemic when, a lot of reverse migration was happening, and people were, kind of going back to their places. And I just thought that why states like, Bihar. So there's a lot of geographical disparity in industrial development or development of income generating opportunities. So why states like Bihar, UP, or Odisha, or even Jharkhand be the, the labor contractors to the rest of India? So with that thought, I started to help the entrepreneurial ecosystem in these states, and it has been well received. So coming back to women in MSME and climate resilience subject. So yeah, and I also thank WRI for having me for this discussion. So as you put the the statistics that in India 20% of the MSMEs are women led, and they employ about 23 to 24% of the workforce. So another data pointer is that that participation of women in the labor workforce, that is which is about 50% globally. It is 80% for men, 50% for women. That is about 23% in India, and it has remained flat for close to 3 decades. In fact, it has actually reduced a bit in last couple of years. So the reason we see when we talk about very small MSMEs, the micro part of the pyramid of MSMEs, we see that there is a lot of disparity in terms of access and agency both. So we see that women lack access to skills, both vocational and financial, access to credit, and the data is a whopping, I think, $58 billion, wherein women-led MSMEs, including the micro ones, lack access to credit. And of course, traditionally, since women are thought to be, thought to bear the disproportionate burden of chores and household work, so that is also, a hindering factor. So, so we've seen that most of the women who come to the MSME fold, like they start their entrepreneurial journey, they belong to the informal sector, and informal sector is catered to by microfinance institutions, and there's a network of rural and urban cooperative banks or rural banks which cater to these kind of entrepreneurs. So. This is the another big problem that we see in case of women entrepreneurs is lack of access to any collateral security, which is very important for access to finance for the traditional banking system. And that is the primary reason is that in India or in a lot of developing countries, particularly in Southeast Asia, the property ownership for women, that is by tradition, that's very limited, and that is not socially acceptable. So that's also a big problem, because without property ownership, women are not the financial decision makers. Another problem is that financial inclusion. When we talk about financial inclusion, so financial inclusion, although there've been a lot of initiatives from the government and non-government side, the story is that they cannot be women cannot be financially included unless until we have a very strong mentorship and hand-holding framework. And without financial inclusion, particularly in the digital economy, so the studies show that the internet penetration. So we live in India, particularly, it's a post-geo era, what we call it. So data has been democratized a lot. So even the rural population, including the women, have access to internet. However, it is about 20 to 30% less than what men have. So one is it access to data, access to the digital economy, and also the hand-holding and mentorship by training these women in digital transactions and all. So these are a few challenges we see women have in their journey to become successful MSME entrepreneurs. A very important point, just to close my on this, is that in India, microfinance movement has been successful. In Bihar, the population, 50% of the population lives on less than $2 a day, and there is good penetration of microfinance institutions. However, when we talk about certain bigger size of MSMEs, which require slightly higher amount of capital, that we call, even in SIDBI, we are the pioneering institution in microfinance movement in India. We call it missing middle, because that segment lacks access to, I mean, after microfinance, what? So a big problem women MSME face, that when they are graduating out of this bottom of pyramid kind of entrepreneurial ventures, the access to capital, credit, skills, vocational skills, even technical skills, that's very, very limited. And also that is a sector which is struggling, despite so many government schemes. Mudra is there, Stand Up India is there, that is still struggling to find its feet, because the sector is, it is very, very biased towards male ownership of enterprises. So that's my take on the problems that women face as micro entrepreneurs in India. Thank you. So over to you, Sunaina.
Thanks, Anubha. A lot of food for thought there in terms of barriers. Sijo, I would turn to you and ask you, with the work that you do in enterprise development, how do you think more women can be encouraged to become a part of the MSME ecosystem in India? And since Anubha has highlighted the problems, are there any models from India that you think are working, which are perhaps replicable?
Thanks for the question, Sunena. And I agree and resonate with a lot of things that Anubha has just shared. There is definitely a lack of unsecured loan products for entrepreneurs. And even like taking a step back from there, the nature of entrepreneurship is also very varied based on where the entrepreneur is located, right? So primarily my work has been with rural entrepreneurs associated with the National Rural Livelihoods Mission. We see that their major credit line tends to be the NRLM loan that they get, which is a 2020 study says that the average loan size is around 7,000, 8,000 rupees per woman, which is barely enough to meet consumption loan requirements versus, something related to OPEX or CAPEX that any growing enterprise would need. So our research for urban and peri-urban entrepreneurship archetypes reveals that there are subsistence entrepreneurs, people who take up part-time work, something like say an Amway, right? Where you don't have to transact and have a very severe trade-off between your care responsibilities versus, your work that needs to be done. Then you also have opportunity entrepreneurs, right? People who find some specific skill, like home bakers who've mushroomed over the last 2-3 years of COVID, especially, where a lot of people have gone back home and started working. Then there are also conventional entrepreneurs who are in that trade generationally. So all of them come with a very different set of scale, and also the sort of interventions that they need also varies. So unsecured credit is something that's very big on our agenda point. The other is also, like, even with unsecured loans, even when we say that it's women who are part of SHG networks, it's never that it's only a woman's decision to take a loan. It's always a joint consultative decision that happens at the household. So there's still a lot of normative barriers that need to be overcome with women when we work with them on projects of their empowerment. That's more or less what I would like to highlight at this point on, like there's one thing also. In Rajasthan, there is this model of Mahila Nidhi Bank. So most of the loans that NRLM offers, that's interest subvention in a sense, where the linkage is given to the group entity itself, right? So it's not an individual entrepreneur's loan product. So Mahila Nidhi Bank is something that's trying to provide individual loan products to those entrepreneurs, but the collateral there is the association with an SHG. So they are monetizing something which is actually intangible. So that's a very interesting experiment that I'm also looking forward to learn a lot more about as it graduates further. Thanks. Back to you, Sunena.
Thanks, Sijo. Ankita, I would ask you next, with your experience with Pratibha Syntex, what can you tell us about establishing a business which is rooted in sustainability, and how can more businesses create an enabling environment for women in the textile sector?
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to wish everybody happy Navratri. So today is the last day. Navratri, already a woman-driven festival celebrated across all genders, I would say. So happy Ram Navami too. And what can be a better day to call the Shaktis from different sectors, So I'm really happy and looking forward to this panel discussion. So talking about manufacturing, textile manufacturing sector, I would just like to quote some examples which right now Pratibha Syntex is doing. So 12 years back, it was a strange feeling that one person from the auditor, he came and he just asked, that how many, everything audit points and everything is going very good, but can you just tell that how many women are working in your company? So the person who was taking care of the audit from Pratibha Syntex, he said 1, 2, and only 2. So 12 years back, this company only had 2 female employees, and those 2 were receptionists. So, it took the management team took a lot of effort. They started, a lot of initiatives calling women at workplace, but it was very difficult for them because in Madhya Pradesh, it was a parda system that time. And a lot of rural, so basically for the workers, asking the female workers to come for sending one woman at the factory, the entire of the colony or the village used to come. So like 50 people used to come to ensure that the woman who's coming at the workplace is safe, so those kind of challenges were there initially in the industry, and we were really grateful for those challenges. Now we are almost 2,500 plus women working in this company, and in next 3 years we will be 8,000 women because we are opening up a new unit where in Ujjain, the city of Mahankal, where the entire unit almost 90% will be women workforce. So that's very cool thing, and we are really proud about that. So I would say sustainability, people just feel it is social, or some people feel it is environmental. It is sustainability is for us, or whatever I've been taught in Pratibha Syntex, is the balance which we create. The same topic on which we are here, right? The balance, creating that balance between gender, the creating that balance between, the right kind of resources which we are using, environmentally sustainable, then only the things will go on for the life, right? So it is very important. A woman plays very, very critical role in balancing the environment, because I would say there are few things which men can do. There are few things which women are very good at. When you balance it, all the decision making gets both the flavors, and then it is good for the entire of the society, well-being of the society. We are taking so many steps in ensuring that the woman comes back on track, or anybody from any place, a rural place. So we have a small club called Club Shakti, where you are physically motivated, emotionally motivated, if you feel that there is a need to talk to anybody. So because as women, we all have gone through a lot of struggles, right? So there will be, like, initially you might not understand the work, you might not if you understand the work, you don't know how to communicate to the boss, because it's a male boss everywhere, right? So how you communicate so that that person doesn't feel bad. A lot of women generally, I would say it is very difficult for most of the women at workplace to communicate the right message to their boss. They feel that either it is too loud or it is too low, so what is that balance? So this Club Shakti tells a lot of people that, how do you create this balance? How do you communicate properly? Even if you feel anything missing in the workplace, you feel that, this should be done, that should be done. How do you do that? Apart from this, at the very grassroots level, what we are doing, we are also teaching the girls how to check their salary account, how to use banking services, how to use internet as a medium, right? How to use UPI services, because this is also, requirement of the day. Most of the women at the lower or the grassroots level, they don't know this. They give the ATM and password to their brother or husband. They use it, and entire the money is gone, and they don't have any social security for themselves. And then they come back and they say that, oh, I'm just earning, but I don't know what I'm earning. They don't know about the deductions, the taxes, the PFs, what all they are, entitled for. So those things we are training them. teaching them to ensure that they actually empower. So that's few of the things which we are doing at Pratibha Syntex. Over to you, Sunana.
That's very useful, Ankita, because I love that Sijo gave us the policy background and the big picture, and you told us how it's actually implemented on the ground, and that transition is fascinating. I'm going to turn to Sharmila now. Sharmila, you of course have a lot of experience in this. What interventions do you think we need to ensure that women have the opportunity to participate in and also to benefit from the increase that we are seeing in green industries and value chains, and what could be the role of technology in achieving this?
So we innovate and manufacture as GE advanced technology, and that's across 3 sectors: aviation and defense, which is very precision oriented. And second is energy, both conventional and renewables. But I said they are advanced technology. And so I'll give you the example from a manufacturing facility that we have in Pune, which is the only one across the world for GE. And it manufactures, it has assembly lines across the sector. So it does aviation, rail transportation, gas controls, blah, blah. What we do there is multifold, with a lot of focus on women. So our target to have women there is at about 50%. We're only currently at 30%. What we do is we actually hire freshers only because it helps build a certain sense of philosophy and confidence in them. And what's the philosophy then, culture that we're trying to build? In a traditional shop floor, what you'll have is an assembler and then a supervisor, and most assemblers will remain lifelong, substantively only an assembler with minor changes to title. What we do is what is called high performance teaming. And so, for example, if we have a team of 20 people, most of them obviously freshers that we've taken, they determine who does what, when, and how, and therefore, builds a culture of how they own, and especially women in a shop floor, because they're a minority, the outcomes in the shop floor. Now, the challenge with hiring freshers, including women, is that they don't have the skill set. I mean, if you were to hire laterally from the industry. And so what we do is we hire them 6 months in advance so that they can undergo class training through observation, on-job training, and things like that. The second piece is around multi-skilling. And here, it's obviously gender agnostic. So multi-skilling is about 2 important pieces there, which is they have to develop 2 new skills for a promotion. And they have the opportunity, something that they can choose from. And most of them do because of the fact that, they belong to a high performance teaming. They determine what they want to do. So they choose a move across product lines. So if you're in aviation, you can choose to be to build a wind turbine or something like that. And therefore, they build a robust skill set. Now, this is very critical for women because much later it actually comes in very handy. Then, of course, there is the adjacencies which we have, which is called a GE Women's Network, the ecosystem, the infrastructure and everything. But I would think that today it should be fundamental. I wouldn't think that we're doing something extraordinary there. I mean, there's a CREST and lots of things, but that's fine. The next piece is around flexibility for life events, and which actually is, again, across gender. But if you see the ones who make the most of it is women. For example, if they take a break from maternity, we encourage that they come back following the same thing. They can go through some 6 months of pre-training and then, come onto the shop floor. The fact that they have had multi-skilling helps them. The fact that they've worked across assembly lines in various sectors, huge plus point for them. And then the last one is where they can choose. I mean, once they become permanent, I mean, you do 2 to 3 years of apprenticeship. And then once they become permanent, they're eligible to go on a part-time graduate engineering program at, say, BITS Pilani. That's what most people opt for. And we reimburse their tuition. But the great thing there, again, is that when they come back, there's a career trajectory where they can apply for managerial jobs. So I'll stop here, Sunaina, and turn it back to you.
Great. I can see that questions are coming in from the audience. We still have some time and trot this around one more time before we open it. I hope I'm audible. There's also like a function going on where I am.
Yes, you are,
Okay.
Sunaina.
Thank you. Anubha, drawing from the context of Bihar in particular where you work, how do you see climate change and all the sectoral transitions like digitalization, energy impacting women entrepreneurs? And what is needed to build a supportive ecosystem for women entrepreneurs and workers given these transitions?
Yeah, thanks, Sunaina. That's a very pertinent question. So, experience in Bihar or other states of what we call Bharat versus India, right? So, I can say that in Bihar particularly, although this state lags on almost all the SDG indicators, bottom two or bottom three, and of course 50% population living on less than $2 a day. However, there's a disproportionate, initiative in terms of empowering women at grassroots level. So I'll talk about BRPL, Bihar Rural Livelihood Mission, which is a part of NRLM, which Siju talked about. However, this has been in Bihar. This has been named. It's been renamed as Jivika, and this is very extremely successful initiative, and there's been a lot of case studies on Jivika. So there are Jivika Didis who are and about 10 million Jivika Didis. So that's a crore of women and who are leading this movement. So there are multiple pieces of work in terms of training, handholding, financial inclusion, SHGs, access to credit, and now a few of them, Jivika Didis, are being transitioned as solar entrepreneurs with 360-degree handholding and access to capital assets, of course, and microfinance. So that's a wonderful initiative which is going on. Coming back to climate resilience, we all know that women bear a very high brunt of climate change, disproportionately high because they are marginalized, and of course this unwanted migrations or maybe natural disasters. So they are at the receiving end. So I've worked with a few startups who are innovating a lot in bringing renewable energy and other environmental goods and services to women entrepreneurs. So there was an observation that women, by nature, whenever they see as entrepreneurs or as household owners, they see that wherever there is a saving in cash. So whenever they see that because of solar installation or maybe biogas or transitioning to a better energy alternative, wherever they see that there is a saving, they are very very quick to adapt way more than their male counterparts to these energy options. However, there's been a mindset problem. So despite Ujjwala scheme, for example, which is on access to cooking gas, despite that, about 60% women are okay to face the drudgery, but not transition to biogas because of some certain mindsets and behavioral problems. So behavioral problems are also there. However, they have designed a stove which is like just like a normal village chulha. However, it is run on biogas. So that's an innovation. So it is required that these kind of innovations, and a lot of innovations that are happening in agri-tech, in small businesses, which have to be brought to women entrepreneurs to make them more resilient. And it is across India, and more so in some of the states like Bihar, UP, and even Odisha. I've seen these kind of initiatives taking place. So a lot of innovation is happening. However, access to these innovation and democratizing them is what is the need of the hour. Digitization, I already spoke about it, and of course my counterparts, they also spoke about it, the training, inclusion, and access to data. That's very important for bringing women in the fold of digital economy. So that's it. And so then I hope I could answer your question.
You did very well, in fact, and it gives me the right segue to ask Sijo this question, because you did reflect a bit on some of the schemes that are being implemented. For example, in skilling or in financial inclusion. What do you have a perspective on them? What have been the barriers to uptake, and how can future programs be designed to be more effective?
Right. So as part of our projects three, right at the outstart of the COVID-19 pandemic, our team had conducted a massive survey across 4 states to figure out how resilient enterprises were, specifically women-run enterprises. In the first round, what we found was that 1 in 3 businesses had shut down, and enterprises with no registration whatsoever were more likely to have permanent shutdown. So there's a deprioritization of their own business versus whatever their male family members or the family might be running as a collective entity. So that sort of a result was fairly obvious. Although some of these enterprises opened later, it's also a high stakes game, right? Like whoever has invested a lot more is the one who's bound to pick it up faster. So in times like that, NRLM had given out certain emergency grants because a lot of these COVID-19 products, right, like the masks and community kitchens and all. In Kerala, we had like a huge surge of community kitchens for quarantined families, right? Those were led by SHG women. So there are these enterprise examples that, kind of capitalized in a sense on the economic opportunity that a pandemic also had. I mean, more like a bulls and bears situation there. There are also these other organizations which are working on some green initiatives. For instance, Center for Energy, Environment and Water has partnered with Will Grow, and they are incubating businesses that use green technology. So among them, like I think the project is called Powering Livelihoods, and they are experimenting with solar chulas, with solar equipment, and also low cost grow houses for green fodder. So some of these initiatives again are small scale pilots at this point, which brings me back to this argument on patents and knowledge being very, first world centric. So a lot of this information or the technology to actually have at scale impact is not diffused much in the developed world, in the developing world. So we aren't really at that point where MSMEs can cost effectively take on green technologies for improving their businesses and become a lot more future proof in a sense. So that's one part of it. The other emphasis with digitalization, like one portion of course is moving towards fintech and other associated products, but there is also social commerce and e-commerce that's available right now, which helps in cutting down distribution channels quite a bit. Of course it comes with its own set of challenges, because search engine optimization or even selling products on e-commerce isn't as straightforward as it looks sitting here. There are so many product returns that an entrepreneur has to handle, and in MSME stock management practices require to be, they have to be very structurally trained on how to handle e-commerce if that is a move that we want them to move towards. So these are some of the examples that I'd like to share. Yes.
Okay, very, very useful examples, all of them. Ankita, I would turn to you now. Entrepreneurs, of course, in the last few years have had to build resilience against multiple threats like climate change, pandemic, economic shocks. In the textile sector, what have been some of these shocks, and how have they impacted women entrepreneurs, women workers, and an organization like yours? What has it done to support women through these crises?
Okay, so I'll give multiple examples. So Pratibha is a vertically integrated company, and we also have one of our sister arm, which is Vasudha, the farming initiative. So first I'll tell, in Vasudha we have, so like Anubha also told, Sijo also told that, hand holding is there, and a lot of women entrepreneurs, they start, but they are not the main members. So, the other person business is more important. So they shut down and then they help there. And then when they get time and money and everything, they start. So to enhance the income of a farmer, so we proposed a self-help group where the women come together and they are producing a lot of bio pesticides, bio fertilizers, bio input centers are being created. So we teach them how to create that with their local things which they have, like neem kada and gomutra and a lot of other stuff. We also have we have a team of agronomists, seed breeders, and everything. So so they teach them. So one business, I mean, one support, it is created from there. They also do a lot of other initiatives like with a tie-up with one of the brand Veritri, we have opened up a nursery where the plants, we give the plants to the different farmers, because whenever you give a fruit plant, it takes generally 3 to 4 years for a tree to become fruit giving, and then it also add to the income. So this entire of the nursery initiative is taken care by women. So that is one of the thing which we are doing. From the customer perspective, because we just started a small initiative where we are supporting a lot of domestic brands to grow. Initially, before COVID, most of the business which we were doing were only export, but after pandemic, we are also supporting a lot of other businesses domestically. So a lot of good brands which are started by women, we are tying up with them. One of them is Bliss Club. They are a woman-owned enterprise. They are making garments for women. So the entire woman-led initiative. So from the customer perspective also, it's a very good brand, sustainable. They are taking care of environmental footprint. So Pratibha is helping them. For the workers or the associates or employees perspective, we are doing a lot of training and hand holding to women so that they are on track, they are on this women factory which I was talking about. So it's we are doing multiple round of training with them. So one is the technical training so that they are upskilled, or then we are also doing a lot of soft skill training is there. Then personality development programs are run for them. Then how to support themselves. We are doing the other lot of counseling is there for them to take care of their health and mental health. A lot of sports are being played. So we have proper one person like nutritionist. She take care of entire of their fooding and everything. So that is there. So a lot of other initiatives are planned around women so that women don't quit the job. Even if there is some thought which is bothering her, we come, we discuss, we talk, that things can be figured out. If there is any problem, any issue, we can talk. We can just resolve it. Don't just quit the job. Quitting the job, yes, it is possible, but it should not be the first thing in a woman's career, right? Anything happened, like for example, because we take care of, we have so many workers, right? So any girl, she is just about to get married, she'll quit the job. She husband doesn't like working, she'll quit the job again. Or the in-laws or the other family member doesn't like her to come to the office, she'll quit. She goes on a maternity, she quits. She comes back, she quits. Something or the other happens, she quits. So we ensure that at least through counseling and these other initiatives, we are trying to stop 50% of the women not from quitting. So that is a bigger thing from as an initiative which we are doing. So that is there. I think over to you back.
And also this phenomena that you said about the quitting, it's actually also backed by data. Ashwini Deshpande, for example, has done this study that looks at how women quit and rejoin the workforce, and then quit and then again rejoin the workforce.
Yeah.
When we talk about lower participation rates, it is not actually the whole picture, because they're also rejoining back all the time. So Sharmila, we've talked about transitions, we've talked about all the sort of disruptions that have happened, and that brings me to my last question for you, which is how can we prepare women for the future of work? What are the future skills that working women need to stay in the workforce?
Thanks, Sunaina. I'll answer that, and I see that in the chat box as well from Amitosh Gautam. So I'll answer it from a slightly broader perspective, which is to look at a productive life for women. I know they take many breaks, so just look at it from a productive life. I would look at two parts for them to be future ready. Doesn't matter if they're in industry or outside. And that's the first one, is about domain expertise for them to pick what they're passionate about and go after. I said about my shop floor, I see youngsters, 20-year-olds who are from the villages of UP and Bihar and everywhere, who come all the way to Chakan in Pune to work on the shop floor. I mean, it says a lot about women and their ability to develop domain expertise. That's one. And this is just purely from what I see. That's one. And I'm so proud to see that. And then the second part, so I look at two buckets. One is domain and the second one is cross-functional. And that's where I look at three things. One is finance, only because it gives them a certain sense of independence. It helps them with commerce. It helps them with trade, commerce, that kind of activities, or personal or professional, and tax, most importantly, when they earn. The second one, which is cross-functional for me, is negotiation. I think it's a very important skill set, and it's understated within women. The third piece is around leadership. And I just feel that at home, the strongest person that you would see is the woman. At home, you would see how they can multitask. At home, you can see how they can make the tough decisions. And I think with those inherent skills of strength, I think they should focus on building in a structured manner leadership skills. So two buckets, to summarize: domain expertise, go after what you love the most. The second one is cross-functional, imperative, I think, for a productive life.
Okay, and that is a future of work definition that I actually understand, because sometimes when we talk about future of work, it goes into very sort of technical domains, and this is very practical, I just have to say. Okay, so Anubha, we have a question from the audience, and I'm going to direct it towards you. It's a question from Avni. I will read it out. It's a long question, but she says that she works with CGIAR, and they work a lot with women rural entrepreneurs who have encountered challenging attitudes and gender norms prevailing at all levels. And these attitudes often hinder their empowerment or restrict their existing status quo. So the question is that she says we have evidence that access to climate information and climate tech is restricted to women MSMEs or collectives due to prevailing norms and attitudes. And tech is not designed keeping women in mind, or information is not relevant for activities that women carry out. So how do we factor this in when discussing gender responsive change for MSMEs?
Thanks, Avni, for the question. As I mentioned earlier, for women, if the climate tech makes a business case, like it results in savings of some sort or improving their cash flows in some manner, then it makes a lot of sense to them. Any tech for that matter, not only climate. And so one very important part of this entire piece of work is to educate women on the options that are available and how they are going to be impacted in the long run if the measures for becoming more future ready and more climate resilient are not taken at this point of time. I've worked with Seva closely on several projects, and we had a project in the Little Run of Kutch, wherein there was salt pan workers who were kind of transitioning to the solar pump sets from their DG pump set, solar and of course hybrid kind of pump sets. And all of them were women. Of course, Seva works with women in a big way. And very interestingly, there was a women cadre of workers which was being trained. It was a UNEP project, being trained to in skills that will help them maintain those DG pump set and solar pump sets and other solar equipments, solar lighting and all that. And these all were women who were, kind of in the age group of maybe, 18 to 30. So there were two pieces of work. One was the solar transition, and the other was, training women entrepreneurs for self-employment on maintenance and repair activities. So that was, one innovation which is, through a solar pump and also through a transition project. So that was brought to the women, and when they saw that there is a very, I would say that a targeted and focused improvement in their cash flows, and also their, the environment is better due to this intervention. So they adapted very quickly. And I have 3 years old data when this adaptation was already above 15,000, and I'm sure it is now way more than that. So I mean, there are few use cases which can be brought to women, and they are quickly to adapt. However, so the education part in terms of innovation, also about training them, skilling them, and making them aware of these choices and how it is going to serve them. That's very important, particularly women at the lower rung of the MSME sector. I would also mention several projects that SIDBI is undertaking. One is that SIDBI has undertaken a massive project on formalization of MSMEs. It is not about only about women MSMEs. So it is a Ministry of MSME project wherein this 99% informal MSMEs have to be brought in the formal fold. And also another massive project, ONDC is SIDBI's promoted company. Uh, so ONDC, Misho, and the other e-commerce startups, where women can onboard, and that can solve this marketing problem to a large extent. So Sidvi has taken up projects wherein in UP particularly they're doing it as a pilot, wherein we are handholding and helping women to come on those platforms, and also not only empowering them at the start but also on an ongoing basis. So maybe not through SEO but through onboarding them on platforms like Amazon or Flipkart or Meesho or ONDC through this intervention. So it is a collective responsibility, I would say. I mean, no one organization can solve it. So different organizations have to come together and solve this gender responsive and climate resilient MSME sector in India. Over.
Right. Much like this panel right now, we have very many different perspectives here. We do have time to take in a couple of questions. There is a comment in the chat box, which I will direct to you, Sito, because it is about SHGs. I'm not sure if you've had a look at it, but it talks about the fact that SCGs need a lot of support and handholding, preparing proposals in banks with accessing finance, and then helping them to manage funds once the SCG once it goes through in repaying the EMIs, buying capital equipment, and such. So, and this has come in from Balchand. What would you say to this? Perhaps are there any training programs that you've seen that address this?
Actually, NRLM has worked quite extensively on this problem. So there are at least 3 iterations of programming that's currently underway. One is called Startup Village Entrepreneurship Program, where new entrepreneurs from the SHG fold are nurtured. They are provided support through a cadre called Community Resource Person Enterprise Promotion. So they are basically given a crash course MBA, and these resources are the ones who go and prepare the business plan on behalf of the entrepreneurs. So that sort of a support system is being put in place for new and nascent entrepreneurs. But there's another scheme called National Rural Economic Transformation Program. So now this one is intended for scalable enterprises which have been around for 1 year, have some sort of formalization in their processes. So they are supported through a second level of cadre, which is called Business Development Service Provider. They are again trained on how to prepare business plans. Apart from this very non-farm specific cadre group, we also have people deployed through the financial inclusion team at NRLM. So there's a financial inclusion CRP. Then there's also a digital payment CRP to sensitize on digital payments and also the security aspects that one needs to be aware of while dealing with fintechs or with other online solutions, because those are also fraught with risks of fraud. So there's an entire ecosystem which is put in place. At least BDSPs is a group that we work with very closely for the scalable enterprises. There are approximately 3,500 BDSPs in 13 states today, and they work very closely with the entrepreneurs in preparing those forecasts based on which they get loans both internally within the SHG Federation, and also can approach banks for mudra loans and the other programs that have been put in place through the various affiliated bodies. So that support system is extremely important, because what we've realized, like, there's no one size fits all solution here. It's a very template based solution. It's a very customized solution, and that requires somebody on the move, somebody very local with a flair for, business diagnostics. And that's a skill set. Like, for instance, a tea shop in a very remote bylane is a scalable enterprise, and a mid-sized coconut oil production unit on the highway in, say, a rural part of Karnataka is also a scalable enterprise. So their product segmentation, their growth trajectory, they're all very distinct, and also often, intangible and non-monetary. So somebody who can understand the psyche of the entrepreneur, what their investment is in the business, and come up with some sort of an advisory, right? Like, some businesses may not need a lot of capital. Some people are happy and content with a small size firm, right? But some definitely seek out something much bigger. For instance, even say Vinita Singh, who started Sugar Cosmetics, she could not get loans till her husband came on board as a co-founder for the enterprise, somebody extremely mobile, urban, right? So there are these various instances, the plurality of design, for instance, in this case, that needs to be addressed by somebody very context specific. So I agree with Balchand on this, that there is a need for specialized services, and that's something which institutionally is being provided. And I believe there are other private initiatives that are trying to also plug the gap, because NRLM also comes with a very heavy social emphasis. So a lot of the BDSPs tend to be women from the entrepreneurial fold, like from the SHG fold. They may not be as mobile as, say, a private dalal, right? A distribution channel person who can easily access buying agent sitting in Delhi versus, somebody who's very local. So there are all these complementary examples that need to, be stitched together to arrive at the sort of services that will actually help women transform their enterprises.
I do agree with that. It always astounds me on how much is actually happening in small pockets, and if only it could be scaled up. We have one more question from the audience, and
Sunena, I would just like to mention a bit of
yes, yes,
a
Ananya.
story. So, those of you, since Vinita's name has come up, so Vinita has invested in a startup which was at our platform, Jhaji Stores. Those of you who must have followed Shark Tank India. So, these two women who are building a pickle and chutney, business, and they could not get it in their first pitch. But at the start of the season two, the Vinita, Namita, and Aman, they went to Darbhanga and saw their, everything and the operations and all, and they invested through an 80 lakh check. However, this investment happened at our platform, the Karekima Ventures, which I started. So we did a round of 2 crore for them, seeing that these two women could not get, the capital at Shark Tank. So this 2 crore round was of course led by Namita, Vinita, and Aman, the three sharks from Shark Tank. However, that was so. I must mention that the startups must have a scale-up story for the investments to come, because it's all about execution. So that was a wonderful story of two women from Darbhanga, not very highly educated, doing something which traditional women do, and not they have engaged a lot of women. About 350 women are making those pickles and chutneys in a very robust manner. This business has really taken up. And the last bit of information, it is when we invested, they were doing an 8 to 10 lakhs rupees kind of monthly run rate revenues. Now they are at 80 lakhs to 1 crore kind of monthly run rate every month. So that's one success story I just wanted to mention. Thank you.
And that was an incredible story indeed. If someone can quickly take on this question, which has come in, on the role of organization and unionization of women workers, and any exemplary cases that you may wish to share from it. I can actually go first because I was talking about this 2 days ago in a panel, and we talked about ASHA workers and A&M workers, and how the very fact that in some cases, especially like Tamil Nadu, the unionization has really helped them improve their rights, their salaries to be recognized as workers and not just volunteers. But this is not for me. So will anybody want to take this on? Sijo?
Yes, I was just waiting if somebody else from the panel wanted to speak on this. So most of these SHGs have been brought together in federations, right? Like none of the SHGs work just in their remote silos. There are also examples of collective enterprises that have been set up. There are FPOs which are being organized to bring women together and have better collective bargaining. However, how that model ekes out in reality is different, because at the very start of this discussion, we talked about collateral ownership being with men, right? So even if the FPO members are women, what share of the produce are they able to redirect towards FPOs is one question. Then even in, say, industries like carpet weaving, which are essentially non-farm, the distribution of labor is again pan household, right? Like some of the more heavy lifting works would be undertaken by the men, whereas some of the more nimble finger, I don't want to use this term, but that's precisely what it amounts to. Like a lot of these delicate labor activities, the embroidery portion of it tends to go to the woman. So even though the final produce is being marketed by the woman as her product, there's a lot of back end that goes into it through a family based division of labor. So there's also an instance from Bihar on Didi Ki Rasoi, which has been set up in district hospitals, where again a collective of women come together. The design of it is supposed to be with partners, like all the Didis coming together as partners, and them taking on the running of the enterprise. It's quite an impressive model, and it's being scaled up across multiple states right now through NRLM. So you have similar models coming up in Madhya Pradesh. I think there are 15 food service clusters like that under process. There are examples in Odisha, in Chhattisgarh, and all of it began with something in Kerala. I'm like a little biased there. So there's this Cafe Kudumbashri example, which kind of provided the meat for Didi Ki Rasoi, and which became like a very big deal now. Like it's quite impressive how the knowledge is being diffused through different stakeholders
Across
and
the country.
SRLMs.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sijo. I'm going to turn to Sharmila and Ankita and request them to come in for last words. Share recommendations for women entrepreneurs or women workers in MSME, given the topic that we have. Just sum up this discussion. I'm outsourcing my work to you. Sharmila, you go first.
Sunena, just to interrupt a bit.
Yes.
So I'm sure we would need a group photograph of the Zoom screen. So please take that, because there's a huge traffic jam outside my office and I need to go.
Okay, so I think Ashwini and Ananya might be on the job and they can share it.
No, if taken already, it's fine.
Is that correct, Ananya?
So I need to drop out, in fact. So I'll join my mobile in a bit.
If everyone could turn on their screens, Michelle and others as well, we'll quickly take a group photograph. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, over to you, Sharmila.
So taking cue from what we just discussed about unionization and the role of organization, I'm looking at it from a different perspective. The same factory that we spoke about does not have a union. And the reason why it works well, I think it's important to understand having an enabling framework from an organization perspective to create an attractive climate for future ready industry workforce.
Sunena, you're
I'm on mute. And thank you, Sharmila. Ankita, last word from you.
Okay, so I would just like to wrap up by saying that yes, all the women are ready, but there is a need for handhold. So we need to counsel and handhold till they come up to that level, and this is what for industry and other NGOs and other organizations are working here for. That's it.
All right, we have one last question in the chat box. Ananya, can we take it? It's directed to Sharmila. Or are we out of time? You're on mute, Ananya.
Yeah, maybe quickly 1 minute. We're at the top of
Sharmila?
the hour. Yeah, but quickly.
Question is, how can a startup in buildings and design industry who can directly impact worker housing directly reach out to larger corporations and manufacturing conglomerates? Any suggestions will help. I think every corporation has what is called a facilities department or a sourcing, depending on the kind of design you're talking about, depending on whether you're talking about just buildings. I think you can reach out to these functional leaders, and they're all on LinkedIn to the best of my knowledge. I think that should work.
All right, I hope that helped. Anubha had to leave the chat, but thank you to all of you. Thank you, Sijo. Thank you, Sharmila. Thank you, Ankita. And of course, thank you to WRI for organizing this, this discussion, which I think is a very, very important discussion and for the times. And it's over to you, Ananya.
Thank you
If
so
I
much.
may just take a moment, Ananya, to just really thank all our panelists and speakers for such an enriching discussion. And the one thing that really stood out for me is the fact that every answer and every remark was a story in itself, right? It's all examples and real lived stories. And I'm just really glad that as part of this initiative, we have a very strong element of, really highlighting these stories and talking about it. And just want to say thank you once again to also our audiences, and we hope to continue this conversation going forward. But once again, thanks, and over to you, Ananya, if there's anything else.
Summing that up, I couldn't have summed it better, Ashwini. Thanks to Sunaina for moderating the session and being right on time. We're barely 2 minutes over the limit. And thanks to all the panelist speakers and the audience for having this very engaging session. We will be coming up with conference proceedings, and we'll share that with all of you. And we look forward. This is just the beginning of a long journey together, I think. So this is just the first step in a longer collaboration. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thanks. And the webinar will also, the recording will also be available for others to watch and share. So just one more point there. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening and good day. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.